All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the mind-bending reality behind eerie coincidences. You know exactly the kind of moments I'm talking about, right? You're walking down the street, humming some completely obscure song from a decade ago, and suddenly a car drives by blasting that exact same track. Or you randomly decide to pack a highly specific book for a vacation, only to sit next to someone on the plane who's reading the exact same one. These moments just feel way too perfect, too weird, and honestly, far too synchronized to be mere chance. It's almost like the universe is winking at you. Well, today we're going to look past that illusion of magic. We're going to dig deep into the source material and examine the exact scientifically grounded blueprints of these moments to understand why the impossible is actually, believe it or not, highly predictable. We're starting off fast here, mostly because we've all encountered those spooky, impossible stories that literally make us question reality itself. Have you ever experienced something so bizarrely coincidental that it made you wonder, just for a second, if reality was somehow broken? Think about it. You haven't spoken to an old friend from high school in, what, over 5 years? Suddenly, their name pops into your head out of absolutely nowhere. 10 seconds later, your phone buzzes and boom, it's a text from them. So, are glitches in the Matrix actually a real phenomenon? Is our universe a simulation running into a line of bad code? Or is there something far more scientific, structured, and profoundly interesting going on right beneath the surface? To really ground our exploration today, our source material defines a glitch in the matrix as an eerie coincidence that seemingly cannot be explained. It's an event that feels entirely random, entirely spontaneous, and utterly detached from the normal, boring rules of probability. It feels like the universe just slipped up and accidentally showed you its source code. But, as we'll see, the very things that feel completely unexplainable actually possess a remarkably rigid, fascinating structure. We're going to tear down this idea of pure randomness and look at the hidden architecture of human behavior. Let's get into Section 1, the Jim twins and genetic hard coding. This brings us to the famous case of the Jim twins, which, frankly, forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about our own autonomy. Are our random choices actually hard-coded in our genes? I mean, we all fiercely love to believe that we have complete, unadulterated free will over our quirky day-to-day decisions, don't we? We like to think that the hobbies we pick up, the people we fall in love with, and the habits we form are entirely of our own making. It's totally fundamental to our sense of self. But biological determinism suggests something radically different. It proposes that our genetic makeup exerts this massive, unseen gravitational pull on our life trajectory. If genes can control the supposedly spontaneous choices we make, well, it kind of threatens to strip away our perceived autonomy. And there is no greater historical case study to challenge our illusion of free will than the story of two boys from Ohio. Just look at the staggering reality of Jim Springer and Jim Lewis. These two brothers were identical twins, but they didn't grow up sharing a bedroom or trading clothes. No, they were completely separated at just 4 weeks old. Literally babies. For the next 39 years, they grew up in entirely different environments, raised by completely different adoptive families, miles apart, completely unaware of each other's existence. Then, in the late 1970s, they were finally reunited at age 39. Researchers were handed this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see what happens when the exact same DNA is allowed to run two completely separate lives. And the parallel roads their lives took? Absolutely astonishing. Both men suffered from tension headaches. Both bit their fingernails. Both drove light blue Chevrolets. They even vacationed at the exact same 3-block strip of beach in Florida. But the sheer absurdity of the coincidence deepens when we look at their romantic lives. Both of these independent men, making entirely separate life choices in completely different towns, ended up marrying women named Linda. Wait, the story gets even crazier. Both men eventually divorced their respective Lindas, and when they remarried, you guessed it, both Jim Springer and Jim Lewis married a second time to women named Betty. I mean, out of all the people in the world, across decades of social interaction, both of these men possessed a biological framework that pulled them toward partners with the exact same names in the exact same sequence. No way, right? And as if the marriages weren't wildly unlikely enough, they both named their childhood dogs Toy. Not Spot, not Rover, not Buddy, Toy. This specific detail absolutely floored the researchers leading the Minnesota twin family study, and it's paramount because it shifts the narrative from just a fun, spooky anecdote into a profound scientific discovery about behavioral genetics. Because think about it, if even the supposedly random name you pick out for a family pet is heavily genetically influenced, that fundamentally shifts how we view biological determinism. It implies that our personality traits, our naming preferences, and our aesthetic choices are woven tightly into our DNA. It's not magic, it's not a glitch, it's genetics. Moving right along to Section 2, Titan versus Titanic and Environmental Prophecy. So now we're pivoting from the internal coding of biology to the external forces of the environment. Let's go back to 1898. An author named Morgan Robertson publishes a novella titled The Wreck of the Titan. The book told the fictional story of the largest, grandest ocean liner ever built, a vessel deemed entirely unsinkable. In the story, this fictional ship, literally named the Titan, strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic in the month of April and sinks, resulting in massive loss of life. Exactly 14 years later, in 1912, the very real, deeply tragic RMS Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic in the month of April, sinking and shocking the entire globe. The similarities between the fictional Titan and the real-world Titanic are so unbelievably precise that it immediately sparks a massive question. Was Morgan Robertson actually predicting the future? When the Titanic sank and people unearthed Robertson's obscure 14-year-old novel, the public went into an absolute frenzy. People accused him of having supernatural foresight. Some seriously wondered if he had a crystal ball or was channeling paranormal energies. I mean, both ships were considered unsinkable. Both hit an iceberg on the starboard side. Both lacked sufficient lifeboats. Both had roughly the exact same capacity and length. To the untrained eye, this was an undeniable, terrifying glitch in reality. But Robertson adamantly denied being a psychic or a prophet. He was, actually, just an incredibly experienced seaman. He had spent years working in the maritime industry and had simply paid really close, analytical attention to the world around him. He looked at the greedy, fast-paced shipping industry of the late 19th century and mathematically deduced that a massive tragedy was absolutely inevitable. He watched shipbuilding technology outpace safety regulations. He understood the persistent, glaring lack of lifeboats on these massive new vessels because the laws literally hadn't been updated to match ship capacities. He knew the specific, highly dangerous speeds at which these behemoths were recklessly traveling through the icy North Atlantic just to set transatlantic records. His fictional prophecy wasn't magic. It was a highly educated, environmentally determined calculation based on deep, deep expertise. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, the blueprint of coincidence. We can now clearly synthesize the two distinct forces that create these bizarre events. On one hand, we have biological determinism. This is the internal side, driven by our genetics and DNA. It's exactly what caused two separated twins to both unknowingly name their dogs Toy and marry women named Linda. On the other hand, we have environmental determinism. This is the external side, driven by deep analytical expertise and a profound understanding of the world's moving parts. It's what allowed a sailor to write a fictional book that predicted the exact fate of the Titanic 14 years in advance. These are two sides of the exact same coin. They take the internal and the external, and they generate incredibly precise, predictable patterns that just masquerade to the rest of us as magic. Here's the core takeaway of this entire explainer. Biological and environmental determinism create highly predictable patterns. They prove that coincidences are not glitches in our reality, but rather the very blueprints of how reality functions. When we experience something that feels utterly impossible, it usually just means we don't have enough data yet. We lack the genetic map of the individuals involved, or we lack the environmental expertise to see the disaster coming from miles away. The impossible is often just a masterclass in underlying logic that's waiting to be uncovered. So, I want to leave you with this. How much of your life is truly random? The next time you experience an eerie, spine-tingling coincidence that makes you question the very fabric of reality, ask yourself, is it magic, or is it simply the blueprint of your genetics and your environment hard at work?